Hello again. I am Chris Lee, joined by Blake Lovell and Max Barr as we set to discuss SEC basketball results from Tuesday. A reminder, content brought to you by our friends at Bet Online. All the major pro sports are in action this week with college football playoffs ready to kick off. Bet Online is your number one destination for all your sports wagering info, including news for pro football, the NBA, upcoming fights, and NHL games this season. Head to the website today, get in the action, see all the updated odds for the week. Remember to use the promo code BELIEVE, that is BLEAV, to get your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts. We always start in order that the games are listed on the SEC's website. That means first up is South Carolina. It beat Winthrop 72-62. Gentlemen, I don't know how much time we've spent talking about South Carolina's backcourt. Meechie Johnson and Talon Cooper are having two of the best years of any guards in the SEC. They were good again last night. Johnson goes for 20 points in 33 minutes. Cooper gets 13 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, although he did have 3 turnovers. The Gamecocks continue to roll, now 10-1. Blake, what did you take away from South Carolina's win over Winthrop?
I mean, in fairness, I think all we talked about is their guards. I mean, I don't know that there is. I don't mean this in the wrong way, but that's really what drives them. I mean, I feel like Max. I mean, we've said the big four. It's kind of we just dubbed it the big
Yep.
four all year of Michi Johnson, Talon Cooper, Miles Studi, BJ Mack. Now I know not everyone's a traditional guard in that group, but Max a big guy and the other three debatable. I think Studi, he feels like a guard, right? I mean, he's 6'6", 4 type guy, but just feels like a guy because he can step out and make shots. That's how you kind of look at him. But yes, specifically those two that you mentioned, Chris, the Michi Johnson, Talon Cooper, that's the reason why they're here. And it was I remember doing the video on Cooper this summer, and I said, hey, this feels like kind of a pretty significant addition for South Carolina team that if you go back to last year, boy, they were bad offensively, really bad. And, he felt like someone that played a lot of minutes in college and now, could help them. And we've seen that to this point. And so, yeah, I mean, it's, you're not going to have these guys, not all of them are going to score 14 points a game every night. But the fact is, you've got 4 great options in terms of guys who can step up and make shots. And like we said, these aren't all going to be pretty wins for South Carolina. They're not. They're not all of a sudden going from what many projected, and ourselves included, to be the 14th best team in a 14-team league, to being a top 3 team right away. They're still working through some things like everybody else, but they've just managed to turn into a lot more wins. And yeah, I thought this was kind of the same theme here, where at times maybe this gets a little close for comfort, but either way, I mean, it's another win for South Carolina, and yeah, it's kind of driven by those 2 guards and everyone else that can kind of play their role right now. So
Yeah, good. I mean, great breakdown. If you look at the game and how this game kind of flowed out, South Carolina jumps out to an early lead, up by 10, 11 points real early, and then just kind of puts on cruise control and a little bit of the fouling problem, and Winthrop hangs around a little bit. Biggest thing that jumps off to me here is the free throw numbers. Winthrop 29 attempted free throws to only 12 for South Carolina. Now South Carolina made 12 for 12, so that'll help. But just gotta defend without fouling a little bit better. Miles Studi, a part of that big 4, got into some foul trouble, 4 fouls. BJ Mack had 3. So when you have a big 4 like we have dubbed South Carolina here, where it's a pretty sizable drop off in production when you don't have those 4 on the court, gotta stay out of foul trouble. And we're able to escape against this Winthrop team, but with SEC play here coming around the corner, gonna really want to fix that up. And hey, better be now with a few 2 weeks to practice and kind of fix that up a little bit before conference play here, because South Carolina is looking good. I'm just kind of nitpicking a little bit, but when you have Johnson, Cooper, Studi, and Mack on the court, it's hard to imagine they'll be outmatched by another foursome. So yeah, I'm liking South Carolina here, still rolling.
Gentlemen, their big four are all transfers. Michi Johnson was at, I think, at Ohio State. BJ Mack was at what? South Florida and Wofford. Miles Studi from Vanderbilt, and Talon Cooper started at Morehead State. I think went to Minnesota. Cooper not even the best former Morehead State player in this league, guys. Did you realize that?
That's a good little nugget there. That's right. Morehead State coming over to the SEC.
Yeah, poor Preston Spradlin built the team and just watching them getting picked off because obviously the number one guy we're talking about is at Auburn right now, which I'm sure you guys knew.
We did notice that, Chris, as Janai Broom was our preseason player of the year. We did notice that, Chris. We did.
He just sits back and waits for me to say these things.
I just waited for that one. So yes, I agree. He is from Ohio State, or not Morehead State, not Ohio State. Sorry,
just saying. All right, next up was Ole Miss 53, Ole Miss 74, Troy 53. Yes, Blake?
I was like, hold on a second. Like, we're not to the rock fight portion of Ole Miss's schedule just yet. Like, you know, they're going to have some games where I think they may win 53-51, but we're not there quite yet. So,
all right, Max, I'll let you start since Blake started on the last one. What do we take away from this one? The guards scored a lot of points as usual for the Rebels. Alan Flanagan, 13 points, 9 assists last night. Matt Morrell goes for his usual 18. What stood out here to you?
Well, if we want to start with Matt Morrell, he had a double-double, and it wasn't with assists or rebounds. It was with steals. He had 18 points and 10 steals. That's unbelievable. I don't think I've ever seen that, to be honest, in my lifetime. But Blake, what happened in this one? This wasn't a close game. I feel like I'm out of sorts right now. I'm like, wait a second, we're talking about Ole Miss, not a close game. Hey, they finally got it done. I think getting those getting the waivers cleared. Brandon Murray, 16 minutes now. Didn't put too much up on the stat sheet, but just getting into the swing of things. Musa Cisse did go down with a little bit of a knee injury. It was a little bit scary there for a second, but Beard said after in the post-game presser that it's nothing structural. So that it shouldn't be, anything too damaging. But I was kind of surprised. We finally got a full 40 minutes and a pretty easy win here for Ole Miss. What do you think, Blake?
Yeah, a little disappointed that this was a 21-point win for the Rebels. I like to keep this thing within 10. But yeah, it was like I was watching this game. I'm like, oh yeah, this thing's not going to be a 10-point game. They're going to wind up winning this game convincingly, and yeah, they did. I mean, But again, it's just I think you see what this team is capable of, and even though Brandon Murray, only played 16 minutes, only had 4 points, I think you're going to see him continue to, remember this is second game back, and so 16 minutes this game, 17 minutes last game. I think once he gets back into a bit of a groove, in real game action, I think you're going to see that he'll help them considerably offensively, but. Same time, if you got Flanagan, Juju Murray, Matthew Morrell, Brakefield, all playing with that kind of consistency, and like you said, a guy that can get a double-double on steals, you're doing pretty good for yourselves. And so the Cisse thing, like I said, it's hopefully fine. They are good to go soon enough, and like you said, avoided any significant injury. So, yeah, man, we just can play what we said in the summer on loop. And now that it seems like they have their full roster is just, 1 through 7, 8, whatever. Now, I feel good about my chances if I'm an Ole Miss fan against a lot of teams in the SEC. And we'll see if this trend continues. But 11-0 have not yet lost in the Chris Beard era. So.
Are we still at 4 unbeatens after last night?
JMU won.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Crazy.
Houston, James Madison, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, right?
Yep.
Think so.
Oklahoma. How about that?
Crazy. And they got North Carolina here.
Mm-hmm.
Big game.
Welcome, Sooner fans. Stay undefeated. Nice for our viewership.
Yes, it is.
Tell you what's not
All
nice for our
right.
viewership.
Yeah, speaking of not nice for our viewership, I present to you the Vanderbilt Commodores, who were down the whole game, got up 7 with under 3 minutes to play, and lost 63-62 to Western Carolina. Vanderbilt now 4-7 against the strength of schedule. I think, according to Ken Palm, is 283. We can talk about the game if we want, but Blake, I got a question for you. Okay, we have covered some bad basketball teams in the SEC, more good than bad, but we've covered some real stinkers. You had Bryce Drew's 0-18 team. What was it, 5 seasons ago? You had Tom Crean's last act at Georgia, where they were 6-25 or whatever they were. Is this Vandy team worse than any of them?
I don't know that I would go that far, and I know that you're gonna say, "Oh, well, the Ken Palm and the computers," and I know, but like I just think that Georgia team was I don't know. Now remember though, the thing with that Georgia team was they won one game in SEC play that year, and that was against Alabama, and I mean statistically, yes, you would have to say yes, right? But I'd have to go back and really think about what some of those teams were, because the fact is, like, they still have the 2 guards, and I know they've there's been ups and downs. They haven't had those guys together all year. I'm trying here, but I still think those are 2 good players. It's just I don't know what everybody else maybe was thinking coming into the season. I even said, I said, look, they could be a sleeper team if everything goes right, but I just still looked at the roster and said, I don't know, like everybody, we always try to be optimistic, and I was seeing people out there saying, well, Vandy's definitely a top 5 team in the SEC. And I don't know where that came from. Just because you have 2 good guards, that's not enough in the SEC to win a lot of games. But think about everything I just said, and I said it for a reason. We're not even talking about SEC games. We're talking about beating Western Carolina, Presbyterian. Nothing against those teams. I think Justin Gray's a good coach, but I mean, I don't know, guys. Like, it's here's what I know. I told you guys, I don't think this was during the recording. I told you guys Western Carolina was going to win this game. Like, you feel the momentum of this program where it is right now. And I said, I think Justin Gray's a good coach. He'll have them prepared. I don't think that's a bad team. Should they be beating Vanderbilt on their home court? No. But it happened. And it's just another one in what is now a lost season for the Commodores, because I can't in any way, shape, or form be confident that they're going to be able to make a run this year like they did last year. I don't know how you could possibly project that based on what we've seen so far. And so, and you got to go to Memphis on Saturday. I don't know if you watched Memphis play last night, but they look pretty good. So you open SEC play against Alabama. So all that said, Chris, that was the lead in for the real news here. And the real news is that Vanderbilt dropping to 4-7 and losing 63-62 to Western Carolina. I'll tell you who rewards that kind of play. You know who rewards that kind of play? The NCAA net rankings, because the Commodores have moved up 2 spots after their loss to Western Carolina. They are now 296. So, of course, it makes sense, right? You should move up after that. So, congratulations to all the net ranking backers out there. Yes, clearly this formula works. So,
yeah, I love the net. The net's really cool and really great. You mentioned Memphis. Just wanted to mention that I think Ole Miss beat them. Oh yeah, they did. Yeah, Western Carolina, not a bad team, but when you shoot 1 for 14 from 3, you're probably not going to win that game. And you don't have Colin Smith, and you don't have Van Allen Lubin, and you're already missing Liam Robbins. Recipe for disaster. So, yeah, I mean, Blake said, he told me off the air yesterday, he said Western Carolina is going to win. I saw the news that Lubin was out along with Smith. I placed a wager on Western Carolina. I mean, it was a bad storm for Vandy, who's already pretty thin in the front court. If they have Colin Smith, they have Van Allen Lubin, probably win that game. They're probably not shooting 1 of 14 from 3 and getting crushed on the boards. So, I mean, that Woolbright guy had like 12 boards, it crushed him. So, yeah, I don't really know what else to say other than what Blake already mentioned. You need more than 2 guards to win games here now.
Without looking, how many games do you think Ken Pom has Vanderbilt winning individually the rest of the season?
1.
Say 2.
If they play
1.
LSU somewhere, they might have a
1.
chance in that one.
Dartmouth. No, they are 10-point underdogs to LSU.
Well, I was thinking the home game. That's the road game.
Okay,
the
they're only 4-point underdogs in
Yeah.
that one. They do play LSU
So,
twice.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. But, I mean, I don't. Again, what else do we add here? I mean, it's this just shouldn't be this way. Like, I'll tell you what I was doing at 11 o'clock last night. I was going through Basketball Reference, and I was tallying the amount of SEC wins that Kevin Stallings had at Vanderbilt in his last, I don't know, 5 seasons, something like that. And then I was tallying how many SEC wins and just overall wins Vanderbilt's had since then. And you could also tie in, I was trying to put together a list of bad losses, which those really accumulated. So it's just, maybe there's some people out there that are younger and they've just gotten into SEC basketball in the past, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. And they would think Vanderbilt has just always been the absolute, bottom tier outside of a couple runs here or there the past couple seasons. They've always finished in the bottom of the SEC somewhere in there. That's probably what a lot of people think if you just started watching this league the past 8 seasons or so. But as more people know who have watched longer than that, my goodness, there was just a time where this was just completely unacceptable. Like, and this, you just never saw this. And, yeah, unfortunately, it does. It feels like this is just a season that has gone off course, whether due to injuries, whether due to a lot of other factors. And yeah, these are just things that take a fan base that already was kind of hanging on by a thread, and you just, I don't even know what you say at this point. So,
Blake, from 2010, 2011, 2012, those were 3 straight top 40 years for Vanderbilt. In 2012, finishing 16th on Ken Pom. So, man.
I mean, here's what I'll say, okay? And I don't want to go too far into this because I know this is going to spur a discussion about how Kevin Stallings had to go and all this other stuff. And I'm not getting into the Stallings thing. Chris knows where I stand on Kevin Stallings, and I'm not going to get into it further. But the fact is, if you look at some of the seasons they had, it's a different landscape too now. Am I saying that he would be able to fare well in maybe this landscape? I don't know, because those were teams he had where he had guys for multiple years and he built them up and that worked. But all I'm using this as the argument of Vanderbilt basketball for those, again, who maybe have just seen the down years, which there have been a lot of them over the past 6 or 7 years. It used to be the thing where you just expected Vanderbilt to be a top 5 team in the SEC, somewhere in there. Maybe they weren't always going to be ahead of Kentucky or Tennessee or whatever, or Florida when they had, their run in the mid 2000s and all that. But they could beat those teams, that they had a really good chance, and they had a roster that, was able to compete and not lose these kind of games. And so I don't know. This is just this is a much bigger conversation in terms of the trajectory of the program and the history and the tradition and all that. And yeah, it's just not, again, outside of the run they made at the end of last season, it's just not been there in a while. So
Blake, Ken Pom has them going 7-24 for this year. And I know it just said they're only predicted to win 1 game outright, but if you got a 40% chance to win, 5 games or whatever, that's 2 wins out of 5 based on the sum of probabilities. But this is what's interesting 8.7% chance to go winless in the league. I mean, you win a game by accident. The fact that those odds are that high, and we're sitting here in near the end of December, and oh, by the way, that doesn't factor in the loss of Colin Smith, I don't think. It's really unbelievable. Blake and I are in the Nashville area. We're very familiar with that program. We've been to hundreds of games combined in that gym. I'm to the point where I wonder what their standards are anymore, or if they really have any.
Like, what? Here's the thing, right? Like, Bryce Drew took over 2016.
Yeah.
Like, it is so wild to think about what's happened since then. Like, really, I mean, and that's,
Yeah.
he went 19-16 his first season, but really beyond that, right? And like I said, I don't think we just completely look away from what they did last season. Like, that was a big achievement to finish the season the way they did. They won 22 games. They won 11 games in league play. They didn't get in the NCAA tournament, but we said, hey, we felt like they had an argument to get there. But it's just maybe that's the most disappointing part of this, I would say, for Vanderbilt fans is you finally get out of the abyss, right? Of just feeling like you've underachieved for however many seasons in a row it had been at that point, 4 or 5 maybe, which I know they won 19 games the year before, but still, you felt like you were starting to turn the corner, but you weren't quite there yet. And then to do it last year and win 22 games. And then it's like, okay, maybe we have finally gotten there. Like, maybe we have finally gotten back to where we really feel like we should be. And then you start the season this way, and again, every season's different now because of the transfer portal and NIL and everything. And you basically feel like you're recruiting a new team every year, but still, like, that is talk about the highs and lows of Vanderbilt athletics. I don't know. It's just, you add another one to the list here based on how this season started. A long way to go. I'm going to be the optimistic one here. Long way to go. A lot of games still to be played. I don't think they're going to go winless in the SEC, but at a certain point, Chris, you know what this does to a fan base. I mean, we saw how many people were in attendance last night. When you lose these kind of games consistently, that's where all of a sudden your fan base just doesn't care anymore. And unfortunately, I don't think this is going to help. So.
All right, moving along to the game of the night in the SEC. Florida in double overtime beats Michigan 106-101. Gators place 5 guys in double figures. Zion Poland leads the way with 22 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists. Tyree Samuel goes for 21 and 11. Max, I'll start with you here. Thrilling game. Florida went through a stretch in the second half where it just could not get stops, but survives and prevails in double OT.
What a game. This game was unbelievable. Zion Poland hits the half-court buzzer beater, then hits a 3 to send it to double overtime. I mean, this game had all the feel of like one of those crazy March games. And it helped pulling for Florida. They come out victorious. I said this a few times to my brother when we were watching it. Tyree Samuel is the key. He just does so much for this team in the post. And now, don't get me wrong, Henlokten, Condon, Haw, great pieces. But Tyree Samuel, just his offensive rebounding, unbelievable. I mean, he had 3 assists. I don't know if all 3 of those were off offensive rebound kickouts, but I would bet you 2 of them are at least. He just extends possessions, athletic enough to put the ball one-on-one on the dribble. I love what I'm seeing out of Tyree Samuel. And Blake, you were all over Tyree Samuel in the offseason with how high you were on him. I would like them to clean up the turnovers a little bit. I think it's Clayton, Kugel, and Richard all had at least 3 turnovers each. I mean, double OT game, so you're playing a lot longer. But just if they can clean up the mistakes just a little bit, I would like it. But I think it was Florida Basketball Hour on Twitter. They tweeted out, they were talking about how Todd Golden changed his ball screen coverage about midway through the second half. And that really kind of flipped the switch for how Florida was defending the rest of the game. So yeah, Florida finally gets one of those wins and pulls one out. Let's see if they can get the ball rolling here down the stretch.
You know, if I had one of those little Canadian flags, I'd just be waving it right now for Mr. Tyree Samuel, the Montreal native.
That's your guy.
I mean, he is. He's my guy. Got a lot of guys. He's my guy. I mean, he's just been rock solid. Like, he's been really consistent, and he's been exactly what they needed him to be. Somebody who can score, he can rebound, defend, block shots. Like, yeah. I just was really impressed with him once again in this game, playing against the former All SEC All Stars, and Olivier Kamwa and Amari Burnett, just playing against a fantasy draft of SEC players on Michigan. Which, by the way, how about that? Like, they're starting five. You talk about some warriors. Give those guys some credit, because their starting five all played 44 or more minutes in this game. Props to Michigan on that. But a huge win for Florida, because we talked about it in the power rankings. Like, it was just one of those where, you looked at the Gators, and I even told someone yesterday, I was like, I feel like Florida's just the biggest mystery, because they could go one of two ways here the rest of the way. Like, I could see them being disappointing, but I could also see them finally sort of, realizing what they can be and really turning it on and getting, a lot of nice wins. And I think this was one that, think about it, right? You just think about your confidence. If you lose this game, then it's like, well, we lost another one. They felt like, we had a chance to win. And we mentioned, I mean, they felt like they had dropped some of their biggest opportunities this year. The Baylor game, the Virginia game, those were close games where you felt like you had chances, and they finally find a way to win this one. So, no, I was impressed. I mean, they made the plays, and because they were down almost double digits, I think, early in the second half, and they just kept kind of fighting, and they kept making plays, and it was different guys. Again, it wasn't just one guy. And like you said, Max, the turnovers are still a bit of an issue, but if you're a Florida fan, you'll live with that kind of effort and that kind of performance, because you see what's there with this team. I don't think they're the deepest team in the SEC by any means, but still, you're getting a lot out of the guys that are there. And, as usual, Zion Pullen showcasing why they brought him to Florida and why I think he's a great fit in the way Todd Golden wants to play. I mean, he's scored in double digits now in every game he's played in, 22, of course, this game. That was a high for him in the Gators uniform. So, yeah, huge win for Florida. They will be moving up our power rankings next week, unless I always got to put the caveat in now, because remember what happened to Kentucky, unless they lose to Grambling on Friday. So don't do that, Florida, because every time we say this about moving a team up, they wind up losing a game they shouldn't. So don't do that, and you'll be fine. So
one more thing I want to add on Florida is past 3 games, Riley Kugel has not made a 3. Okay. Against Richmond, he was 0 of 7. East Carolina 0 of 3, and then 0 of 5 against Michigan. He's on an 0 and 15 3-game run that Florida is 3 and 0 in.
Shooting like Chris Lee out there, man.
What have I done?
I'll leave it at that.
What have I done to deserve the wrath of Blake lately?
Listen, Chris, you
get sick for a week, you get the flu.
I know, that's what I was going to say.
So
the problem is,
period again.
You had the week off, and so there's a lot of jabs that we like to, a lot of jokes that we had to hold in, and we're like, well, we can't get these out. Chris isn't here, so. But now that you're back, we got to unleash them all, like in rapid succession here. So Max has got some for the next video, so don't worry.
Oh, don't give me any ideas.
Love you guys too. Merry Christmas.
All right, Max, we can mark off joke number 4 on. We'll get to 5 through 10 on the next video.
All right, we got plenty more SEC content coming up. We're going to get into bowl games. Oh, sorry.
Before we get there, let's talk about Alabama, Arizona real quick.
Yes,
because we were going to do this in a separate video, but honestly, guys, we just got behind and didn't get a chance to get to it. So the game's going to be played tonight, Wednesday night, as we're recording this. So we're just going to quickly run through this with just some quick hitters on maybe what we think is going to happen in this one. Obviously, the headliner, again, 3rd straight game for Alabama, just against a gauntlet of teams, all 3 teams in top 10. Ken Palm, I'll get the net rankings for them soon enough. I assume they're not top 10 in the net. They're probably all in the mid 50s or high 80s is my guess. But Max, what do we think here? I mean, should we just? What's the clip I think you put out on Twitter of the Alabama Creighton game? Is anybody going to get a stop in this game? Can we just ask that same question about this game here?
So I was breaking this break. I actually did like a 2-hour research on this game this morning.
We're going to give you 2 minutes to talk about it.
I went down the rabbit hole of this game. Yeah. One thing that is pretty important, I think, is the pace of this game. So the past 2 games, Alabama's played Purdue and Creighton, obviously, two teams that like to run their half-court offense, kind of slow the pace down a little bit and get clean offense. Arizona wants to fly. Arizona wants to get on run. I think there's only like a 0.1 second average difference with their offensive tempo. So this is we tweeted it out last night. I think this is the 3rd game this month to have a total over 170. It's opened at 173 and now up at 173.5. It's actually getting pushed up. So I mean, if there's ever a game that you want to tune in for, man, is it this one? Because it's gonna be fast. Another little note that I wanted to touch on that I thought was pretty interesting was in the past 5 games. So that includes losing at home against Clemson and then the Purdue and Creighton loss. Alabama's never trailed by more than 10 points. And we talked about in our reactions how they've got that fight and they're fearless and they feel like they're never out of the game. The numbers are kind of showing that. It's going to be hard to outrun this team. Like you really need them to have a bad shooting night, which is, I don't know if that's going to happen. So this is just pretty much offense against offense. Arizona's weakest defensive efficiency margin is their 3-point defense. Alabama's weakest is their interior defense. It's just like both teams are kind of just like made to score against each other, and I'm excited. It's going to be a blast.
Yeah, I think it was did the podcast with Dave yesterday. She made in. He's like, poor Alabama, and I just completely forgot about this, but he's kind of right. It's like Alabama just seems to get the teams that are just pissed off, and Purdue had lost to Northwestern the week before. I know they came back and beat Iowa, but they had lost to Northwestern the week before, game they shouldn't have lost. Creighton had lost to UNLV, game they shouldn't have lost, come back and, kind of feeling pretty good after that. Then Arizona doesn't have the performance they want against Purdue. They lose that game, so now they get to come back with Alabama. So Alabama just had a bad run of not just playing great teams, but playing teams that are a little angry and have something to prove. So it's unfortunate that's the setup again in this one. But like you said, this will once again be another entertaining game. I mean, I think anytime Alabama plays, it's going to be entertaining this season. And, I think we got some pushback, at least on Twitter we did, having Alabama too high in our power rankings. But I just said I think Alabama's going to be fine. I don't know how this game plays out because it's like the 3rd game and again this gauntlet, these teams. But I'm curious to see how this one unfolds because I think, again, Alabama offensively, they got a shot here. But they're going to play an Arizona team that has something to prove after the way they played against Purdue. So, yeah, it should be a fun one.
Yeah, Alabama's 8 in Ken Palm. Losses to what? Creighton, Purdue, Clemson, Ohio State. I mean, come on. Some of these teams in this league hadn't played one game like those 4.
They need to win one of these, though. Like
I get it. And I'm interested to see what Mark Sears' line looks like by the end of the night, by the way, with the numbers he's putting up. But yeah,
that's the thing is, like, I feel like they put themselves in a position where this is not a must win, but man, you really need this one, like based on all the other opportunities you let slip away. So look, they'll have plenty of opportunities to pick up good wins in SEC play, and I don't think they're in danger of missing the NCAA tournament or anything if they don't win this one. But boy, you would love to have this game if you're Alabama.
This feels a lot like that season 2 years ago where they just couldn't defend. Now, the difference was they would win all the good games that year. They'd beat the Gonzagas, and then they'd go lose a game to some mind-numbing team.
I also think the difference is this team, I think, wants to defend. I just don't think they're very good at it. Like, and I think that team a couple of years ago, we were like, they don't want to defend. Like, they don't. I think the inconsistency had a lot to do with, I just think that they were not bought in on the defensive end. I mean, I see this, Max. Like, I don't watch Alabama and think, oh, they're not bought in on the defensive end. I just watch and say, they've just got some fundamental issues, whether it's not getting your feet set in the right position, whether it's just, being too physical, those kind of things. Like, I don't see this as an effort thing by any means. I'm not saying that was a complete issue for the team a couple years ago, but I just think it was more of, I just feel like that's kind of more the case with this team. It's just they just don't have the defensive skills that that maybe would help them a lot more and would have helped them win some of these games they've already played. So.
Yeah, and that's why you're starting to notice that our opinion on Alabama keeps looking more positive, because every time you watch this team, they're like, man, this team just fought their heart and soul out in this game. It's like they really, really are hustling. One little quick note that I wanted to touch on: Muhammad Wagi, past 4 weeks, okay, so just over the past 4 weeks, not whole season, in the SEC in plus minus, he's tied for third. He's plus 10.6, Wagi. The only issue is his foul rate per 40 minutes is absurd. The guy is just fouling almost every other possession. So if Wagi can stay out of foul trouble, they've got something working there. The numbers are proving that. It's just he has not been able to stay out of any sort of foul trouble lately. And in a game where you're going to have Umar Ballo and Krevis going back-to-back with then Kashad Showtime Johnson at the 4 giving you hell all night long, you're going to need Wagi to stay out of foul trouble in this game. That's going to be a really big piece of this game that I don't think a lot of people are looking at, because the defensive efficiency compared from Pringle and Stevenson to Wagi is very big. Wagi is much better defensively if he doesn't foul.
Like, I want to point to a stat that might support what you're saying about them wanting to defend. Okay, tempo, 14.2 seconds per offensive possession. That's 4th in the country, according to Ken Palm. Defense, 18.5 seconds per possession. That's 345th. I'm not sure that I've ever seen a team with such a large discrepancy in the rankings on tempo from one side to the other.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, again, it's just kind of the nature of what this team is. Like, and like we said, we're not sitting here saying, oh, look how right we were. But I mean, we called this in June. We just said this was going to be a team that you just looked at the roster and you said it's not that they have guys that aren't going to buy in on the defensive end. It's just we don't see how it all comes together on that side, because a lot of the guys they have are highly skilled offensive players that, either are joining from somewhere where they were maybe a good defender, but this is just a different animal when you're playing not just at SEC, but you're playing the kind of schedule that Alabama's played so far. And so, yeah, I mean, that's why, again, I know some people are going to look at this and say Alabama's 6-4. They're probably going to be 6-5 after this game. How can you possibly be high on them? And how can you possibly think that this team has a high ceiling? Well, it's very simple. It's just there's nobody out there, I think, that is as dynamic offensively as Alabama outside of a handful of teams maybe. And so something else I would point out, and I pointed this out yesterday in the conversation I had with Dave, was here's what's going to happen. We see this every year. There are some SEC teams out there so far. You can look at their offensive efficiency numbers and you can say, boy, that's a great offensive team. Guess what's going to happen? When they get into SEC play, that team is going to quickly become average, because we see this every year. Some of these teams are going to pump those offensive numbers up against, inferior competition. But when you start playing SEC teams where you got guys that are same size, athleticism, length, got it all, right? You're going to start to see some of these teams not make as many threes, not get as efficient, easy shots inside the paint. And those offensive numbers start going down. Alabama's offensive numbers, they're not going down. They may go down a little bit, but the way they play, again, at worst, I think Max
too many guys who can score. Too many guys who can score.
Yeah. At worst, they're probably a top 5 offensive team. I really believe that. At worst. So Alabama's just going to go outscore some teams, I think, once we get an SEC play. And we'll see. This is just a theory, but I think you're going to see that there are some teams offensively that right now we may be like, oh, man, that team is fantastic on offense. Yeah, well, let's see who they played. And let's see, if they're going to be able to keep that up offensively against teams that are going to be way more physical. They're going to be 85 free throws a game in the SEC sometimes, very physical. So I think that's the advantage that Alabama still has, even though they may be one of the worst defensive teams in the league. Also a team last year who was one of the worst defensive teams in the league. And guess where they made up for it? With their offense. And you know what I'm talking about. The Fighting Dennis Gateses. So I think there's a path still for Alabama, even if we go into league play, like, oh, their record's not impressive. If you watch them play, trust me, they can still win a lot of games, even with, a struggling defense.
He always figures out a way, Max.
I know. I was going to say the same thing.
What's that?
To bring up the Fighting Dennis Gateses.
Oh, did I mention Dennis Gates? Huh. I think they play on Friday against Illinois, by the way. I think the Illini, that's going to be a tough game for the FDGs. So
that's good.
We'll be here to talk about it and more. We've got some football bowl game previews on the way. For Max Barr and Blake Lovell, I'm Chris Lee. This has been Southeastern 14 presented by Bet Online.